Hi, this is the outline for Chapter 2, the Segment 3 group, pages 33 to 42. We're going to start with glial cells. Glial cells can communicate with one another through neurons. They affect neuronal functioning by providing neurons with raw materials and chemical signals that alter their structure and excitability. These cells, unlike other neurons, continue to divide for life. These cells respond to injury by swelling, which is known as edema. This edema damages neurons and can result in a lot of brain damage. There are 4 forms of glial cells: astrocytes, microglial cells, oligodendrocytes, and Schwann cells. Astrocytes is a star-shaped glial cell with numerous processes that go in all directions. Evidence that crosstalk among astrocytes and neighboring neurons constitutes a tripartite 3-part synapse. Microglial cells are extremely small glial cells that remove cellular debris from injured or dead cells. Despite being very small, they are remarkably active. They continually extend and withdraw very fine processes that form a spherical containment zone around an injury. Oligodendrocytes are a type of glial cell that forms myelination in the central nervous system. Meanwhile, Schwann cells perform myelination in the peripheral nervous system. The Schwann cells are also what do ensheathing on the axon of a neuron. Myelin is the fatty insulation around an axon formed by glial cells that improves the speed of conduction of action potentials. This gives the axon the appearance of a string of slender beads, in which only small, uninsulated patches of axon, called the nodes of Ranvier, are exposed. Due to myelin, electrical signals pass from one node to the X, which allows them to go from one neuron to another very quickly. Multiple sclerosis is a disorder that is the result of widespread degeneration of myelin. Next, we're going to move on to the peripheral nervous system. This is the part of the nervous system that includes all the nerves and neurons outside of the brain and spinal cord. So basically, it's the opposite of the central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system contains motor nerves and sensory nerves. Motor nerves are nerves that convey neural activity to muscle tissue and causes it to contract. Sensory nerves convey sensory info from the periphery to the central nervous system. These nerves are divided into 2 systems: the somatic nervous system, which provides neural connections to the skeletal muscles, and the autonomic nervous system, which supplies neural connections to glands and to smooth muscles of internal organs. The somatic nervous system contains cranial nerves and spinal nerves. The cranial nerves contain 3 pairs of sensory nerves: olfactory, which has to do with smell; optic, which has control over visual; vestibular cochlear, which has to do with balance and hearing. There are 5 pairs of cranial nerves that are also motor pathways. There are 3 nerves that control eye muscles. They are known as oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens. The spinal accessory nerve controls neck muscles, and the hypoglossal controls the tongue. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves that emerge at intervals through openings in the backbone. Each spinal nerve is a fusion of 2 branches, roots. The dorsal root carries sensory info from the peripheral nervous system to the spinal cord, whereas the ventral root carries motor messages from the spinal cord to the peripheral nervous system. What is contained in spinal nerves are 8 cervical nerves, which are the topmost of all spinal nerves. They're located in the neck. 12 thoracic nerves, which are below the cervical, which is in the chest region. 5 lumbar nerves, which are located in the lower back. 5 sacral nerves, which are in the pelvic region. And 1 cochlear, which is in the tailbone. The autonomic nervous system controls unconscious movement, which also controls organs. Aggregates of neurons called autonomic ganglia are in the autonomic nervous system, and they innervate major organs. There are three major divisions for the autonomic nervous system: the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and the enteric nervous system. There are two terms to know with the autonomic nervous system, and that's preganglionic, which is when neurons in the autonomic nervous system that run from the central nervous system to the autonomic ganglia, which innervates organs. And then postganglionic is when neurons in the autonomic nervous system go from autonomic ganglia to targets in the body. The sympathetic nervous system arises from the thoracic and lumbar spinal cord, and it sends axons a short distance innervating the sympathetic chain, which is a chain of ganglia that runs along each side of the spinal column. The sympathetic nervous system is involved with what we call the fight or flight response because it prepares your body for action by increasing your blood pressure and your pulse, and also making your eyes dilate and just making you very energized. It does this by producing norepinephrine, which is a neurotransmitter. The parasympathetic nervous system is basically the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. It helps the body relax, also known as rest and digest. In the parasympathetic nervous system, axons travel a longer distance before terminating in the parasympathetic ganglia. The parasympathetic nervous system produces acetylcholine. The enteric nervous system regulates digestive activities of the gut. Next, we're going to go into various regions of the brain. First up is the cerebral hemisphere. Inside the cerebral hemisphere, which is divided into the left and right side, is the cerebral cortex, which is lumpy convolutions of cerebral hemispheres, which are the result of elaborate folding of brain tissue. Ridges are called gyri and sulci. There are four major cortical regions: the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the parietal lobe. There are boundaries between these adjacent lobes. One is called the Sylvian fissure, which is also known as the lateral sulcus. It's a fissure that divides the temporal lobe. And then the central sulcus is a fissure that divides the frontal and parietal lobes. There are many terms you should know for viewing the brain and body. The sagittal plane dissects the body into right and left halves. The coronal plane divides the body into front, anterior, and the back, posterior. The horizontal plane divides the brain into upper and lower parts. The medial term refers to forward the middle, meaning you're moving forward from the middle. And then lateral is referring more to toward the side. Ipsilateral is when you have a second location, and that second location happens to be on the same side of the body as the first location. Contralateral is if that second location is on the opposite side of the first location. Superior just means above, inferior just means below. Anterior or rostral is head end, and posterior or caudal means tail end. Proximal means near the center, whereas distal means away from the center. Afferent is when a term used when an axon, tract, or nerve carries info to a region we are interested in, whereas efferent, with an E, carries info to a region we are not interested in. Dorsal just means toward or at the back, and ventral means toward the belly.